Consequentialism is this normative ethical theory that says whether an action is morally good or bad depends on whether you maximize the good consequences and minimize the bad consequences. So the standard case that philosophers usually give is this one in which there's a trolley barreling down the tracks, its brakes have been cut, and if it keeps going the way it goes, it's going to keep going straight and run over and kill those unfortunate 5 people on the tracks in front of it. Now you are positioned next to this lever, and the only thing you can do is decide whether to pull that lever or not. If you don't pull the lever, everything's just going to go the way it's been going. The trolley is going to barrel down the tracks, kill those 5 folks. If you pull the lever, you'll be able to divert the trolley onto the secondary track where, unfortunately, there is 1 person tied down, so you'll kill that 1 person, but you will save these other 5 people. So if you just look at the consequences involved there, you might say, well, the consequences of doing nothing are 5 people dead and 1 person alive. But if you pull the lever, then you've got 1 person dead, but 5 people alive. So those seem like, in general, the best consequences. So the consequentialist would say, look, you are morally obligated to pull that lever, save the 5 people by killing the 1 person, because that is the better consequence. Now, what I want to do in this video is just go over some of the different ways that consequentialists can flesh out their theory and give you different flavors of consequentialism depending on how you fill out the details of the theory. So, the first big thing is that consequentialist says that you should always maximize the good consequences, but that in itself doesn't tell you which consequences are good and which are bad. So the first thing the consequentialist has to do is also give you a theory about what's intrinsically good. What kinds of consequences are good consequences that are worth maximizing? And you can fill in just about anything you like here. So you might say, look, what's really intrinsically valuable is the number of human lives that exist. You might say, nah, it's not necessarily the number of lives, it's the amount of pain that people are experiencing. You should always act to minimize the amount of pain and to maximize the number of people who are without pain. Or you might say, no, it's the number of desires that are satisfied. We should always take actions that maximize the number of people's desires that get satisfied. Or you could just go like way out there and you could say, no, the best universe is one in which there are the most corgis as possible. So always act to maximize the number of corgis. That's probably an improbable theory, probably not right. The other ones have some better things to recommend them. But the thing to notice is that what consequentialism tells you you should do is going to depend crucially on what your account of the intrinsic good is. So to see this, consider 2 different possible flavors of consequentialism. The first kind of consequentialism says, look, what's intrinsically good are the number of lives that you save. The second theory of consequentialism says, no, what's intrinsically good are the number of people who are without pain. Now, these 2 flavors of consequentialism, because they have 2 different theories about what is intrinsically good, they are going to give you 2 different ideas about what you ought to do in a particular situation. So suppose you're in a situation in which you're a doctor, you have 4 patients that are in just a tremendous, excruciating pain. There's nothing you can do to put them out of their misery except to kill them. So now you might be asking yourself, oof, what should I do morally? What ought I to do here? Well, the first flavor of consequentialist is going to say, look, the thing that is intrinsically valuable is the number of people who are alive. So morally, what you need to do is act to maximize the number of people who are alive. Therefore, you must keep these 4 patients alive as long as possible, even though they are in excruciating pain and misery that you will be unable to stop. The second flavor of consequentialist will say, whoa, wait a second, that seems like a bad theory of what's intrinsically good. They might say, look, simply being alive is not intrinsically good. If you're alive in an excruciating agony, that's just not valuable. What we really should be maximizing is the amount of people who are alive without pain. And since these 4 patients are just in excruciating pain, the thing that we ought to do is to kill all of them to put them out of their misery. So the second flavor of consequentialist is going to say, look, if you're that doctor, you are morally obligated to kill all 4 of your patients so that they no longer experience this pain. Notice, it's moral obligation. And consequentialism is very demanding. It says you must do the thing that maximizes the good consequences. So in this case, you must kill your patients. If you do not kill your patients, you are doing something morally wrong, because it is obligatory for you to kill your patients to therefore maximize the number of people who lack pain. So you can see how very crucial it is. Even if you're a consequentialist, that's not going to tell you what you ought to do in a particular situation until you also specify just what is the intrinsically good, valuable consequence that you ought to be maximizing.